Welcome back to the Photography Clips podcast. You ever hear about Edward Weston? His life was like a movie, filled with twists, drama, and of course, incredible photography that changed the game in the 20th century. Here is the interesting story of this remarkable American cultural personality. Referred to by many in his field as a master of 20th century photography, Edward Weston was born on March 24, 1886, in Chicago. He had an interest in photography from an early age and would go on to be one of the first experts and proponents of highly detailed photography. His parents were Edward Burbank Weston, who was an obstetrician, and Alice Jeanette Brett, a Shakespearean actress. He was their second child and only son. Edward's mother died when he was 5 years old, and his sister Mary, who was 9 years older than him, took over raising him. Edward and Mary were very close, and she was one of the only stable relationships of his young life. When their father remarried 4 years after losing their mother, Edward and Mary did not like their new stepmother or stepbrother. Edward's father devoted most of his time to his new wife and her son, and Mary got married and moved to California. This left Edward isolated. He quit school and spent most of his time in his bedroom. Edward's father gave him his first camera as a present for his 16th birthday, and Edward loved it. After taking it on a vacation to the Midwest with him, he was interested enough in photography to buy himself a better camera when he got home. He spent much of his time taking pictures around Chicago. He also developed his own film. Eventually, he took a job at a department store to earn some money, but continued taking pictures in his spare time. By the time he was 20, he felt confident enough in his work to submit it to a magazine called Camera and Darkroom. The magazine published a full-page copy of his photo called Spring Chicago, and this is the first known publication of any of Edward's work. Shortly after turning 20, Edward's sister Mary encouraged him to come to California, where she was living. He did, and moved near her home in Glendale, California. However, he soon decided he needed more training if he was going to pursue a professional career in photography, and so went back to Illinois to attend the Illinois College of Photography in Effingham. It was a 9-month course, but Edward finished all the work in 6 months. The college refused to give him his diploma unless he paid for the full 9-month course. When he refused to pay, he simply moved back to California, confident he had enough training to be a professional photographer. He worked at a couple of different photography studios in California, learning not only different photographic techniques, but also how to be a business person with a photography studio. Learning both the artistic and business sides of things was good for him and made him better at his craft. He spent several years in this kind of on-the-job training. While he was training, Edward's sister introduced him to Flora Mae Chandler, a graduate of UCLA and a grade school teacher. Flora was Mary's best friend and a distant relative of the head of one of Southern California's most powerful families. Edward and Flora fell in love and were married on January 30th, 1909. The couple had 4 sons together, but it turned out not much else in common. Flora was a conventional woman from a Puritan background, and though he was rather conventional himself at that time in his life, Edward disliked convention. He soon took up a relationship with a bohemian, bisexual photographer named Margaretta Mather, and the two of them became photographic partners for more than a decade. Years later, even after they were no longer in contact, Edward referred to Margaretta as the most significant influence on his life. Edward eventually opened his own photography studio, and as his wife had more sons, he began to become more involved in the California cultural scene. 2 of these were Rubé Richer and Tina Modotti. Ritchie and Modotti were a couple, but unmarried. However, they pretended to be married to Ritchie's family. Edward eventually began an intimate relationship with Modotti, which Ritchie knew about. Ritchie continued to be friends with Edward, and they even shared a photography studio together in Mexico for a time. Edward's reputation grew as he collaborated with more photographers and experimented with different photographic styles. He began being viewed as an artistic photographer, and his work moved from commercial photography to exhibits of his work. He had many pieces published as well. Exhibits within his lifetime during his period of active work were more common for him than for many other contemporary photographers. Edward took more than 1,000 photographs over the course of his career. Edward and his wife eventually separated, but did not divorce for 16 years afterward, once all their sons were grown. He remarried to Cheris Wilson on April 24, 1939. He referred to her in his personal writings as the love of his life. In 1945, Edward began experiencing the first symptoms of Parkinson's disease. He began to withdraw from his work and also from Cheris. Eventually, he and Cheris broke up, largely because she had no interest in photography. An initial attraction for Edward, as all of his previous serious relationships, was with fellow photographers, and over their years together, she became his model, muse, and assistant. Photography was taking up too much of her life, and when she left Edward, she described it as breaking free of photography. Edward advertised for an assistant and took his last photographs in 1948. He died January 1st, 1958, with $300 in the bank. Pebble Beach, California, near where he lived, was renamed in his honor as Weston Beach. Thank you for listening and subscribing to the Photography Clips podcast. If you would like to learn more about my photography, please visit photographyclips.com. I hope you have a wonderful day. Now go and enjoy the beauty of God's creation through your lens.